Hello. In this video, I want to talk to you guys briefly about new entrant strategies. If you think of kind of where we've gone in the class talking about different aspects of strategy for a business, this is sort of the last one that we haven't covered yet. These are strategies related to, say that you have you want to open a new business in a market. So you are the potential entrant becoming the actual entrant, or potential competitor becoming an actual competitor. And so basically, when we think of the new entrant, we generally think in terms of three types of strategies. The one that a lot of people think of most is the pioneer innovator strategy. So that would be somebody who has created something that either fulfills a need that's not been fulfilled before, or fulfills it in a way that it has not been fulfilled before. And what I mean by that is basically there is no other business doing what it is that you're doing. And so an example of that might be that you have identified that customers let's just say in the high-tech industry, have a need for a form of artificial intelligence that nobody's really found a way to satisfy that. And you've now got a product that basically, for the average consumer, let's just say, takes care of remembering, storing, and retrieving everything that happens for them every day so that they don't have to pay attention all the time. That would be something new. There's not something like it out there right now. There is a clear customer segment that would see that as a need, and so you would be a pioneer or innovator there. Or an alternative would be that maybe there's something that is currently being fulfilled, but not in the way that you're fulfilling it. And so, one example of that most people point to is Amazon. Prior to Amazon, it was not really possible for you to do your everyday grocery shopping, non-perishable grocery shopping online. That was something that you went and did at the store, and they introduced the ability with I don't know if it's their Prime product or whatever it is, but then it is, in addition to everything else you could get from them, you could just do your everyday shopping from them. And so it's a need that already existed, but they found a new way of doing it that creates some real conveniences for people that they didn't have before, particularly for bulky items. And so they were an innovator in that space. The advantages, obviously, to being an innovator are that you really disrupt the status quo. So whatever it is that people have been doing or selling to customers in the past, that no longer measures up, because this new product that you've brought in is so incredibly different and better that it causes customers to seriously think about whether or not they would switch. And it's no longer just a question of, oh, I got to pick between this feature and that feature, or this quality versus that price. It is a completely different value proposition in terms of features that nobody else has, and possibly even at a price point that's competitive with them. The other advantage is that the person that brings this in first obviously has a big first mover opportunity. And so to the extent that they are able to convert or pull customers, or maybe just have customers buy the other thing and buy their thing, maybe they aren't really even competing head to head right now, then they build up this market share that is hard then for competitors, as they catch up to this, to take away, because the competitors just appear to be Me Too companies at that point, or Me Too products. And so you can imagine that somebody comes out, Amazon comes out and does what they did as an example, and then shortly after that, several other companies start doing that. Well, they tend to be described as kind of like Amazon, but. And so they will always just be known as somebody that basically copied Amazon, as opposed to somebody that really came out and created the new thing like Amazon. There is the advantage, if you're the first mover, that you sort of put your competitors in that position. terms of disadvantages, there is a risk to being an innovator. You're introducing something to the market that it really hasn't seen before. And so if you guess right, and it in fact is something that customers like and value, then you're a rock star. But because it's not been introduced before, you don't know for sure whether that will happen, and there's equal chance that they may react negatively to it and basically say, I see that what it does, and that's an interesting thing and all, but I don't really need one of those. In which case you've made this investment in innovation and not got paid off. Or I see that it does it in a different way, and that's, again, interesting and all, but I kind of like the way that I get my needs satisfied now. And it's really not worth it to me to switch for whatever difference there is. And so that's a pretty big risk for an innovator, that the market just may not place value on their innovation. The other thing, really, from a disadvantage standpoint, it often is very expensive to innovate or pioneer a product. And if you aren't careful, it's only new for a very short period of time. And after that, it's either the same thing that you had before, or there are now imitators that have something similar to what you have before. And no matter what, your product's no longer the new thing. And so, obvious example of that would be the iPhone. When it first came out and nobody else had one like it, it was, you had to have it, and Apple built up a big market share with that. But as time went on, everybody had an iPhone, or they had a competitor phone, a Samsung or whatever else, and it was very difficult to wow them into getting new adopters for a product, or buying the new version of a product, when quite frankly it's just not that much different than the old version. And so again, a real challenge with being an innovator is how many times in a row can you truly innovate, as opposed to just making an incremental modification. So great when it works, but it sometimes doesn't work, and even when it does work, sometimes it really only creates an advantage for you for a short period of time, and then you really have to work to top it. The second strategy is what we call an adapter strategy. And so this would be more in line with what I think most market entrants do, or many at least, let's just say. And so that would be somebody that looks at an existing business and basically says, I think I can do that better. I can either find an improved way to satisfy the need, and so I'm a differentiator. I offer different features or offer it in a different way. Or I can do it at better value as a low-cost leader. I found some cheaper way to do it, and therefore I can sell it more cheaply. And so you've taken what somebody else is already doing, and you've started with that and made your adjustments to that. Clear advantages to that over innovation. It generally does not cost as much to adapt as it does to innovate. Additionally, the technology, the processes are usually well understood, and whether or not the customer will like it or appreciate it is generally well understood. It's already been studied, and we sort of know what people want and what they like and don't like about the existing product. And so there's a lot less risk that the customers are going to completely ignore the product. The disadvantage, obviously, there is a question about whether or not the particular thing that you do will be of enough value for a customer to switch. Since it's an adaptation, it's like an existing product, only different. And so the customer has to care enough about the difference to say, well, I'll switch from the existing product to this. And so that's kind of your challenge. Similarly, when you're an adapter, you can often find yourself in sort of an odd situation, and that situation is that you've now made a adaptation or an innovation to the product, and so your competitor will respond and do the same, and then you'll have to do the same, and then they'll have to do the same, And so at some point you are caught in this sort of bitter upgrade version war. And again, think in terms of like the smartphone between Samsung and Apple now. It's the new versions are coming more and more frequently. The modifications from one version to the next are becoming less and less of a big deal. And so you just find yourself in a situation where you feel like you've got to put out something that's a little bit better than what you already have on some sort of a fast schedule, just to try and maintain your edge. That can be expensive. That can lead to, as we've seen in some of the tech industries, that can lead to having products released too quickly, and so the quality suffers, and that actually hurts your market share. The last strategy is an imitator strategy. Sometimes hard for people to understand the difference between an imitator and an adapter. An adapter takes an existing business and tweaks it just a little bit, and then creates a new one that competes directly against the existing business. An imitator takes an existing business that exists in one market and moves it into another market. Now, usually that's a geographic move. So, for example, that would be somebody going to, let's just say they go to Germany and they see a cool kind of business in Germany that they know that they don't have around the Princeton area, or in the States, wherever it is that you live. And so they decide, hey, why don't I open something like that back home? And that's a sort of typical imitator. The more recent examples are probably people that take existing businesses that are brick and mortar businesses, and they convert them to internet businesses. So in as many ways as possible, they want it to be the same product and the same experience as you would get brick and mortar, but we're going to give it to you over the internet. And so again, we're sort of moving to a different market. It's the market for people that are online shoppers as opposed to the market for people that are in-store shoppers. The advantages from an imitator standpoint, again, we know the demand and the customer preference pretty well in the market it's in. We can test that out a little bit more readily in the market that we want to take it to, simply by explaining or showing or providing samples from the existing product in the other market. Clearly, the technologies and processes and everything are well understood. And so since you're just picking up something that's already done one place and moving it someplace else, you pretty much don't have to figure new things out. Obviously, the big disadvantage, the big one is that if you can imitate it, then that means others can too. And so you go see a cool restaurant in Germany and you think, well, we'll have one of those in my hometown. And let's say that people like it. As soon as your competitors figure out that people like it, they'll go open a German restaurant down the street from you. And there's nothing you can do to stop them. You don't have something unique that you created and you own the intellectual property to. You basically borrowed somebody else's intellectual property and imitated it, and so you have no special protection or anything like that. So that's one big disadvantage. The other is, obviously moving to the new market should give you some first mover advantage, but it just can't last for long. Even less than with the adapter and the Innovator, simply because it's too easy for somebody else to do what you've done. And so if you have to grab so much of the market share quickly when you come in with this new imitation into this new market, that it just makes it not worth a competitor coming in and trying to take some of that away from you, simply because there's not a big enough pie there to share. Maybe it's just not worth the investment for them to do it. And so obviously ideal kind of imitator situations are situations where there's something that's successful someplace else. When you bring it back to your local market, Maybe it's a market that really is only big enough to sustain one provider well. And so when everybody else starts looking and saying, well, if we come in, then we shouldn't expect to get more than 50% of the market share, and they run the numbers, they're like, it's not worth doing for 50% of the market share. And so sometimes that's sort of a good way for an imitator to think about it is my natural protection becomes the fact that I'm in a niche market anyway, and that quite frankly, there's just not a big enough market there to justify somebody else coming in and trying to share it with me. So anyway, those are the big three strategies. And so when you think about your new entries, you ought to be able to characterize them as one of those three. I'm not saying that's exhaustive, but generally my experience is if you think about it just a minute, it will fit pretty well into one of the three. It might straddle a couple of them, but the goal obviously is for you to understand and be able to identify, what the new entrant looks like at this more strategic level, what strategy they're adopting. So I hope that's useful for you, and look forward to talking to you later. Bye.